I started my first business when I was 21. I co-founded my first software company in 2014. That we eventually sold within 4 years to KPMG. It was their first software company they purchased in their 150-year history.
Wow.
Hearing it from somebody else, it sounds like, wow, what a successful life. But people only see the highlight reel, right?
Yeah.
And we don't see the struggles, the pains, the tears that come with those outcomes. I remember being in this tiny cubicle in North Sydney, and it was an empty office, and I was looking around and I was thinking, I just don't know what to do. I don't know who to talk to. I would hide myself in the library and ended up immersing myself in books. It was only a matter of time until I ended up writing one. And that was the journey I had in the book. It came from a lived experience to almost becoming a journalist, finding out evidences, speaking to experts, speaking to people with lived experiences. And then COVID happened. And that's when people started saying, Joel, aren't you the guy that's writing about this book on disconnectedness? I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm stuck at home as a solo dweller. Something's not right, and I can feel it, and I don't know what to do. Yeah, I've never felt this before. All of a sudden, things changed for us, Paul, because all of a sudden, we were surrounded by people who were in the same boat as us. If only you had this magic ball to understand what investors are looking for at that particular point in time as well. And each time I do something, whether I succeed or fail, her only question is, are you happy? Because it's real, right? We're just being authentic in this call, right?
Exactly.
It's life.
Yes.
When things like loneliness does not discriminate, it doesn't matter if what socioeconomic condition you're in, what nationality you're in, what business you're in. There is, in a way, disconnectedness in all of us. And the thing is, because no one can see it, we can hide it, and we try to fill that gap.
Are you enjoying this podcast? Then please do me a huge favor and become part of the 12% of viewers that have hit that subscribe button. This helps me tremendously to grow my channel and in turn help early stage startup founders on their journey.
Hello, Paul. Thank you for having me.
It's a great pleasure. So let's just dive right in, and let's start with your journey, like growing up in the Philippines and moving to Australia at the age of 12 and going through chronic loneliness and severe depression and going on to co-found software implementation business at the age of 29 years of age, which eventually became a publicly listed company, recognized as the Young Entrepreneur of the Year at the age of 34. And you culminated in co-founding a SaaS company, which was later acquired by KPMG. And on top of that, you've written a book about mental health that a lot of the psychologists in Australia have and are using, although you're not, you don't have a background in psychology. So you've had a really amazing journey. You're still a very young guy compared to me, particularly. And so, look, why don't we start with those early years in the Philippines and then coming across to Australia? How was your life then? And then how did things change when you came to Australia?
Thank you, Paul. Firstly, I wanted to say, wow, that hearing it from somebody else, it sounds like, wow, what a successful life. But people only see the highlight reel, right?
Yeah.
And we don't see the struggles, the pains, the tears that come with those outcomes.
Without Joel, we're learning from failures. We're learning from all those things that happen to us, because those stories about success that we always hear, there's always something else going on behind that, and that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah,
difference.
no,
Yeah.
and thank you for having me. I hope that I'll be able to share some insights, at least from my experience, right? I'm
Yeah.
learning every day, and even when you do all of those, I've done all of those things that you mentioned. There's always something to learn from each of those events. And yeah, to as a summary, you're right. I arrived in Australia with my family back in 1991. I was 10 years old.
Right.
I was one of three siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And we first arrived in Melbourne, and that was a really difficult time. I did mention in my book, in terms of being a migrant during those times and not being able to speak English was difficult. I remember going to school in year seven and throughout high school, hiding myself during recess and lunch times.
Wow.
At recess, I would hide myself in the toilet because it was a 15-minute break.
Mm.
And then at lunchtime, I would hide myself in the library and ended up immersing myself in books. It was only a matter of time until I ended up writing one. But really, it's this perceived sense of fear that you know you don't belong, or that you might not be acknowledged, or you might get teased for being different.
Yeah.
And regardless of whether that is real or perceived, it was what was going through my head at the time. And then, going through that, not telling anyone about it, especially in the 90s, there was no such thing as, mental health as an awareness campaign really started about a decade ago, and we've been better at it, with things like "Are you okay?" and the stigma around it is has improved, right? That we all go through mental challenges. Even things like loneliness does not discriminate. It doesn't matter if what socioeconomic condition you're in, what nationality you're
Yeah.
in, what business you're in. There is, in a way, disconnectedness in all of us. And the thing is, because no one can see it, we can hide it, and we try to fill that gap
Yeah.
any best way.
Going on at the moment. There probably always was, but it's more, I guess, more reported now and people are more aware of it. There's a lot of research, as you particularly know, that loneliness is one of the biggest killers in society.
Yes. But yes, it's actually a silent killer,
Mm.
Paul, and I don't know how much time we've got, but when I think of loneliness in the business sense, I remember, co-founding a my first startup software company. I remember being in this tiny cubicle in North Sydney, and it was an empty office, and I was looking around and I was thinking, I just don't know what to do. I don't know who to talk to. I have no soundboard.
Mm-hmm.
Investors didn't know who we were, so they didn't want to put money in. Customers didn't want to work with us because we had no brand. Um, Partners didn't want to trust us because who are we? We're just one of, hundreds of software apps out there. And so, as an entrepreneur, I feel for the rest of us, as you know, in Australia at any given time, 90% of startups will fail within that 5-year period.
But no, well,
Yes, and it's a combination of many things, right? A lot of us are skilled in certain areas, whether it's technical or a background in law or a background in accounting or sales or a business director, and eventually we decide that we've had enough of the corporate world, for example, and we'll go do it out on our own. and you do these things, but there's a lot of missing skill sets, a lot of missing resources, a lot of missing tools. We don't know what we don't know, and we keep we've got this blinkers on. We're going to go this way, but when you don't have the right connection to the people, the tools, the resources that you need to challenge you, to coach you, to hold you accountable, to test your ideas, we become right in our own mind, but may not necessarily be the right thing to do. In the same way as, I'm a parent now, and we do our best to guide our children. But that's why it's important for children to have that guidance, because they may not see it, but we've had the longevity and the time and the experience to know a better direction for them.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it's the same thing for many businesses. I believe that to increase success is to have the right people, the right connection at the right time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you just sitting there in that office all by yourself, there's probably some startup founders, I'm sure there would be, in that sort of similar situation now. Figure they've got something, it might be a SaaS product or other, and there are lots of others, out there, and they don't really know what they should do. What sort of advice, having gone through that, what sort of advice could you give them, Joel?
Where the silver lining for us, and the moment when things change for us, Paul, is when we decided to get into a co-working space.
Mm-hmm.
And for the listeners here, I'm not sure if you guys would have heard, you're probably all around the country and maybe different parts of the world, but in Sydney, we have the Sydney Startup Hub.
Yeah.
And at the Sydney Startup Hub, there are 700 startup founders in that facility, in that building, owned by the New South Wales government. And at the time, we ended up working at Stone and Chalk, which is the largest fintech startup hub in the Southern Hemisphere at the time, and probably still is, and more.
Yeah, yeah.
And all of a sudden, things changed for us, Paul, because all of a sudden we were surrounded by people who were in the same boat as us.
Yeah.
Going through the same struggles with getting funding, hiring people, and everything else in between around building a successful business. But not only that, the hub, depending on the hub that you choose, is also going to be very important. We were very lucky that they were not just a space. These people is almost your startup success team. They will lead you. They have lots of different events where they bring in different leaders and different successful people or organizations, including potential coaches, mentors, investors, teaching you how seminars on how to pitch your deck.
I was riding in on a motorbike once to give a talk. That was you.
I don't know how you saw that, Paul, but that was such a long time ago. I can't believe that's still around. Yes. But funny you mentioned that. Yeah. So for the audience, just for context, I was one of lucky startups that was asked to pitch our business to a live audience. And it was on, I forget what level it was at the venue at the time. It's like level 17, for example. And it was going to be a room of 100 people. There was going to be some investors, other mentors, coaches, other startups. And, it's your 5 minutes of fame, right? Like this is your time to shine. And I was just having fun, Paul. I was a bit younger, and I
Yeah.
decided to. I said to Stone and Shop, look, guys, I'm gonna put my motorbike on the 17th floor. I don't know how I'm gonna get it to the 17th floor, but in my head, my plan was when they call my name out that I will turn on my motorcycle and ride it into the platform, and that's when I introduced myself. Funnily enough, all jokes and fun aside, it just so happened that there were some key people in that room, particularly at KPMG,
Mm,
that saw the presentation.
okay.
And
And it would have
so
stood out because how many people do that, you know? Like,
maybe never.
yeah, exactly.
So yeah, so sometimes how do you stick out like a sore thumb? Come up, be creative, just have a bit of fun. You're a startup. What's the worst that can happen? Your
Yeah.
business fails?
Yeah, do the next one. You know. That's
Funny you did say that. So at the Sydney Startup Hub, I ended up becoming the Founders Circle facilitator,
okay.
where every month I had the privilege of bringing the founders into a setting where it's, Chatham House rule apply, and what you say to be vulnerable and talk about your business, and you're surrounded by your peers. Feel free to open up,
Mm.
right? And I've learned a lot from that. The highs, the lows, what works, what doesn't for people, the advice that they would give to one another, and
Yeah.
what they're doing just a bit differently. And I've noticed that most of them have had at least that most of them were actually in their 40s or
Mhm.
50s.
Mm.
When you think of startup, they're in their, you think maybe they're in their 20s,
Yeah. Like the
early
Mark Zuckerberg type thing.
30s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I realize that a lot of the startups there have had two or three businesses before, and they're giving it another crack.
Mm.
But this time it's working, and I think it's because don't see failure as don't let that get you down. It should be a confidence builder. You should see it as what did I learn from that, and what can I do differently next time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was reading an interesting post that you had on LinkedIn where you talk about Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, billionaire founder of Spanx,
Yes.
and you were saying
Yeah.
like when she was growing up, her father would often ask her the same question at dinner time: "What have you failed at this week?" Which I thought was wonderful. And so her dad encouraged her and her brothers to fail, and which allowed her to be much freer in trying things and spreading her wings in life. So, and you say there that you want other founders to know that failing is a good thing, that failures are really just lessons on the path to our success. Failing fast and learning from it is economical in the long run. It's through failure that we can achieve success. And yeah, that's exactly the theme of this show. And so having written that and, having had a lot of successes as well, can you talk about maybe your biggest failure, even if it's a failure along the way, failure in one of those business, and what lessons you learned from that?
Sure. Sure. How many can I share? Have you heard of Airtasker?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So before Airtasker,
Mm-hmm.
and this was, back in maybe the late, maybe in the 2000, was it before the GFC or after GFC? I had this dream of creating uh, uh, a uh, a website or a platform where people can rent themselves out
Mm-hmm.
to others. This was before
Yeah.
Airtasker, and I think the learning I gained from that is this: it didn't succeed. It was It was at the time when, I ended up creating a website where for you to transact, you have to physically ultimately get onto a laptop, for
And
example,
then,
to either rent yourself out or be a renter of
yeah,
services,
yeah.
right? But at that time in the 2000, I think 2010s and onwards, that was a time when apps were becoming alive, and that's when
Mm.
it was becoming popular, and it was the easiest way for people to transact, and it's at the right interface. It's on the phone. It's easy to just.
Yeah,
It's very user friendly, right? And that's what Airtasker did. Was they went straight to that
yeah,
um,
yeah.
app app world, and they also had a lot of backing and resources, more resources than I ever had. I did not seek out funding. I thought I could do it with my own money, with my own resources.
Yeah.
I was trialing it out. I think I was half into it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and clearly it was actually a good model because Airtasker today is, working,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I've used it myself. And there are other apps out there right now that, you know, that people use. But the keyword was the learning from that is probably the right solution to fill a gap in the marketplace. It could have been maybe the right time, but
mm-hmm.
the wrong time.
Yeah, yeah,
Because even at the Sydney Startup Hub, what I keep seeing was you can have the best solution, but timing is everything.
absolutely.
Perhaps the market isn't ready for it.
Yeah. Well,
Perhaps there's not enough awareness for it. Perhaps the need isn't just there yet. COVID showed to a lot of businesses you have to transform digitally like right
yeah,
now.
yeah,
And the adoption of technology was going like this to this
yeah,
overnight.
yeah,
So I think that's the learning from that is
yeah.
think about when you're creating an idea, do you have uh, do you have a solution that will fill a gap in the market? Is it the right time? Do you have the right people, the
Mm.
right technology in mind that people need for that season?
It's interesting because I draw parallels with my startup, 360 video virtual reality training. So we started in 2017. At that time, it was really early days for VR. So it was too early in a way, unless you're in the American market, because there's companies like Striver that would end up training 1.5 million Walmart employees and Verizon and a whole lot of stuff. And so at that time, the technology was also, I remember doing demonstrations, putting phones in headsets and not working, all that sort of stuff. Whereas now, such a better experience with the whole technology. So it was timing, was technology as well. So it was all early for that. And then we also thought, more bootstrap as well. And we took a long time to build, the app and the editor and all of that. And then there was other companies that came along, just 2 or 3 years ago with a lot of money, a lot of funding, and they just blew up doing pretty much exactly the same thing,
Yes.
So this is all about lessons learned,
Lessons
so
learned.
in
Yes.
hindsight, but there is always, like, a lot of startups will work really well with bootstrapping. I think even some of the biggest out there, Atlassian and a few others, they
Yes.
just bootstrap. I
Yes.
think if you can do that and it works, it's best. But if you're in a market that's really growing, and you need to get out there quickly, then sometimes investment. I also got a business buddy, Shane, that always says, you always hear about people talking about, their successful businesses, that they had 2, 3, or 4 businesses. A lot of that is to do with, once they've had that first success, then they have the money to put into the others to sort of quick start it and put resources where it's needed and gives them a lot more chance of success. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, it's funny because investors would be listening in on this. When you, I just wanted to finish that when you have an idea in mind that you want to go to market with, and you're right, you either bootstrap or you need fund. If you're going to get some funding, if only you had this magic ball to understand what investors are looking for at that particular point in time as well.
Yeah.
You know, the investment from investors, whether they're high net worth individuals or private equity groups, through to organizations looking to acquire, their needs change depending on the season, depending on the market opportunities, etc. So an astute startup need to be able to navigate that, almost like a trading system where you've got like these machines and you're seeing everything. You have to do your homework, right? Because if you think, oh, but my solution is so good, why are they not investing in it? And by the way, it's not just about your idea. They look at the people, they look at the strategy. Can they trust you?
Yeah.
Who is around you? Who is supporting you? What are your skill sets? It's a lot, Paul. It's a lot of bootstrapping in my view. If you can afford to maybe create a minimum viable product and test that out in the market and it's working, right? Now you're building data, you're building credentials, you're building trust. And sometimes that's what the investors are looking for. At some point in time, bootstrapping is good to a certain point, but when it comes to, say, the technology space, hiring resources and individuals are especially that have technical skill set and development skill set, they're a huge investment. And sometimes you need to hire them sooner rather than later, to make an impact fast, right? Before the wave, before you miss out.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're going to need money. But if you are one of the lucky ones where you can self-sustain the business over time, you're probably better off, because it means you don't have anyone telling you, not telling you what to do. Everyone is well-meaning, but when you have multiple parties included in your business, the complexities increase.
You get a lot of investors and they're on the board and they can sort of really take over the whole thing, depending how it's all set up. There are a lot of horror stories around that as well. I remember once talking to a CEO of a really large organization, and I was trying to, get our startup into what he's doing, and he was quite interested, but it just didn't work out. The technologies didn't work out with each other. But we started talking, and he was saying, Paul, we've been going now for 8 years. They're in 180 countries. And he said, we're only just breaking even now. And on top of that, he said, I have no control over my company. He's just a very small percentage. And he said, if I could have done it differently, I would have. So he was sort of, I guess, resenting the fact that, even though he was seen as his CEO of this big company, the company wasn't making any money and he had no control over it.
Yeah, there are many different stories. The thing is, it's really an art form on both sides. Both sides are trying to understand how to work with the other. So as a startup, the advantage that you have, as a growing business that's not been acquired, the advantage you have is speed, agility, pace.
Yeah.
Ability to pivot very quickly and make decisions. the hard part with the big guys, the great things about them that they can't, sorry, the great things that they can bring to a younger organization is things like governance, for example, process, uh, uh, financial resources, uh, uh, experience, and giving you an understanding around commercial, operational excellence, financial excellence, things that a startup don't, quite
Yeah.
frankly, are not good at,
Yeah. Well,
right?
like me, I had no business background, so I had no clue on that.
Right. And
You
then
know?
so you have to weigh the benefits, when when someone wants to come in and um come and work with you for a fee, have the share of the business, etc., etc. Have a think about, know your strengths, and then thinking about what value can they add other than just
Absolutely. And
big,
do you get
yeah.
on with them?
Mm.
Because you're going to
Yeah.
be working with them a lot, I
Well,
guess.
you just don't know, right? You just don't know until it's done. And yeah, it's not easy. If there was a if it was easy, everyone would be in business together.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about this book. 'Cause I think it's really amazing how, the Australian Psychological Society is sent it out to all these psychologists in Australia. And you don't have a background in that, but tell us about, you know, why you wrote this book, what happened with you, because I know, you did go through that period of chronic loneliness and severe depression.
yes,
So if you can
yes,
tell
yes.
us a bit about that, and then
Mm,
how the book came about, like that experience that you had. So I know you talked
yes,
earlier about when
yes.
you were at school and then you were hiding, and it must have been horrible. So maybe
Yeah,
start from there and then go
yeah.
on from there about that journey into
Yeah, sure, sure.
depression.
Thank you. Thank you. So, by the way, the book is called Better Together:
Yeah,
Why Loneliness is Killing Us and What We Can Do,
which
which is
I'll put
Joe.
up.
Yes,
Yeah, so it's
thank you.
Joel.
Yeah,
Rem-
Joel Ramirez,
yeah,
.net. But
yeah,
thank you for
yeah,
for
yeah,
sharing that
yeah,
with the audience.
yeah.
Growing up and going through, by the way, in the 90s, at the time I was 10 years old when I arrived in Australia, turning 11 at the
Yeah.
same year. In the 90s, you don't call it loneliness. You don't call it, depression. It was because of the stigma around it. You don't know what you're actually going through.
Yeah.
It's just this feeling of great sadness,
Mm.
really. You have parents who's also come from another country, and they too are going through things that are really difficult.
Yeah.
And so for me, once we sold, so just for those people in watching this or listening to this, I started my first business when I was 21. I co-founded my first software company in 2014. That we eventually sold within 4 years to KPMG. It was their first software company they purchased in their 150-year history.
Wow. That's
So
impressive.
that was kind of nice, and that was in partnership with Microsoft and Commonwealth Bank as well. So that you'd think we hit the trifecta, right? The one of the largest consulting firms, the largest software vendor, and the largest bank in
Yeah.
Australia supporting you. So when that finished, I said to my wife, I don't know what to do next, Belinda. I really have nothing to prove. And I thought about it, and I decided I'm going to write a book. And in my book, and I was thinking, when I was going through those rough patches, was I the only one? am I the only one who's sad, who's going through depression, going through loneliness? Or is it bigger than me? Is Australia going through this problem?
Yeah.
We talk a lot about depression, but what's actually causing that underneath all of that depression? When you look in all my interviews, Paul, it all came down to your environment in a lot of ways, apart from, DNA expressions around, your genes, your
Yeah.
susceptibility to certain conditions, but your environment can trigger it, events can trigger it, but also your connections or lack thereof of meaningful connections with the right people at the right time. And so, I was thinking, was I the only one going through this? If not, who? Is Australia a lonely country? And I was asking, I'm more about asking questions. As an entrepreneur, you're asking questions. I'm almost wanting to solve it in my head. Like, what happens to us when we're lonely? Is it simply something that you forget about because no one sees it's not affecting you? Or is it something more sinister if you let it prolong and let it become chronic? What happens to our neurological mind? What happens to our bodies? What happens to our community when we let this prolong? And who is affected by it? When it comes to that community, does it happen to immigrants like myself? Does it happen to who else? Does this happen to? And then you realize it's as you uncover it, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And okay, now that you understand all that, can we solve it? Is there a solution around this?
Yeah.
So that was my journey. So it became more of when I read books on things like depression or maybe even loneliness, I couldn't find any books locally. A lot of the books were either from Europe or in the US, but they came from academics. So they're mostly
Yeah.
almost helping you, self heal yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing about depression and loneliness that's self-help. Yes, you learn in the book, it's actually we're social creatures. Step one, you need to go back and can we solve this? And that was the journey I had in the book. It came from a lived experience to almost becoming a journalist, finding out evidences, speaking to experts, speaking to people with lived experiences.
That's it. That's what counts, That's genuinely where it comes from. It's like this podcast that I'm doing. I've lived through the startup experience, and now I'm interviewing experts and people that have been through it as well, and that's people can relate to that. So I can see how that would happen with your book as well.
And by the way, the Australian Psychological Society, said that, Joel, this is the first time we are distributing a copy to, but I think at that point, 27,000 registered psychologists.
Wow.
It's the first time we're doing that for an author. This is quite unique to us as well, right? So it was, I said, really, me? My book? And I think it's a combination of timing. Remember, in business, it's about timing. When I was writing it, I wasn't thinking about making money. I wasn't thinking about saving the world. I was thinking about if I can add value to even just one person. That's a starting point, right?
Yeah.
And no one kind of cared when I was writing it from 2018, and people would say, "Hey, that happens to old people. I'm glad you're writing it for them." You have zero idea. Globally, in all the research studies, parents listen to this. if you have teenagers from the ages of 12 to 24, and particularly the age of 16 and they're girls, watch out, please be there for them. Listen, because they are the age group that are affected by loneliness the most. And the reason behind that, Paul, is before the age of 25, our brains haven't fully formed yet. Me and you were more resilient today because of all the experiences that we've gone through. But imagine at that period of their time, they're trying to figure out who they are. They're wanting quantity over quality relationships. They're trying to find out which peer groups they fit in.
Especially with social media as well.
Social media, the hormones that they're going through, the pressures of school. It can be very difficult to navigate that, right? And then COVID happened. And that's when people started saying, Joel, aren't you the guy that's writing about this book on disconnectedness? I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm stuck at home as a solo dweller. Something's not right, and I can feel it, and I don't know what to do. I've never felt this before. And all of a sudden, it made sense to people. It was a right timing. It was unexpectedly, surprisingly for me, in a way, COVID helped me create awareness, and it led me to becoming part of a reference committee that provided advice to both for the Australian Prime Minister and the UK through the Groundswell Foundation on creating awareness, education, and more on the topic of mental health and loneliness.
Yeah. It's interesting. You know how you say it's an Australia thing. I think it's also pretty much worldwide, but I don't know if it's more in Western countries or not. But one thing, do you think it would be similar type of thing in the Philippines? Because just my experience from being there only like a few weeks, I saw that people, it was very, very community-based, family-based. People were very social. Even if they didn't have much money, they'd be outside playing cards with each other, and and they were very, very friendly, giving you what they can have, so to speak. And do you think it's a type of cultural thing as well? Do you think there's a difference between?
That's a good question, Paul. That's something that in my research, I wanted to understand Australian culture. What is our what is our culture? And I guess I have the privilege of perspective, because as a Filipino, as you mentioned, arriving from the Philippines, I was there till I was about the age of 10. And so I began to look for people who are experts in culture, and that's in the book, right? And what I found was I was looking at, at least from my experience, why is that? Australia in Western countries are largely individualistic cultures. And whilst opposed to being collectivists, such as the Filipinos, two very different things. Both have pros and cons, by the way.
Yeah.
And in a collectivist society, it's about the group, not yourself. So what you're doing is for others, right? But in an individualistic, I guess, point of view, it's about the self, about the immediate needs of the self and the core family, right? Australia is also, in Western countries, are also highly masculine society, as opposed to more feminine societies like the Philippines, for example. When I say feminine, I'm not saying woman-like. I'm saying they're more family-oriented, for example. It's about supporting that, right? While more masculine society is about taking that teaspoon, all right, and hardening up. And, if I've got problems, I'll solve it on my own. I don't need your help. I'll figure it out. I'm not weak, right?
Yeah.
But, like to your point, in the Philippines, they may have nothing, and they will give everything to you. You know why? because they understand hardship. They've been through it as a you know, economically, we have lots of poverty, right?
Yeah.
And it's in that poverty, actually, it's in that collective pain that people begin to understand the power of together.
Well, relax. Beautiful.
And you'll find out in my book
Yeah.
why in Australia, we don't ask for help. I don't want to give everything away.
No, okay.
Yes.
It's true, but it's true that, so we're a bit more reserved as well. And yeah, I feel like myself growing up like that, you never ask for help. And I've heard through things before, but you never tell anyone, you just go through it and suffer it,
Suffer.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, let's going back to like the 90s, the 80s, even for me, the 70s.
Yes.
Mental health problems didn't exist, so to speak, and people would just, they're doing a nut job.
Yes.
So it was just...
Was it?
That's about, all that existed. So the awareness has increased so much, and it's still got a long way to go.
Yeah.
But books like that you've written, I commend you on that, because that's
Thank
wonderful.
you. Did you know that there is no word for loneliness in the Philippines?
Really?
It's not a word. So even my Filipino friends, I would like, no, there is. I said, go, do it, say it. And they will mention a word. I said, yeah, that's not. They said, oh my goodness, you're right. It's almost for me. It was a revelation. It's almost like a Western word in a way.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, it's a whole different culture. So we can learn a lot from those sort of cultures, And there's, I'm sure there's other things as well. I mean, it's not nice for people to live in poverty, obviously. So it's great if people can lift out of that poverty, but being so community oriented. Well, the loneliness is not such an issue, obviously, and that's really nice. Now, talking about your family as well, and you said that your mum was I read that your mum was a cancer survivor.
Yes.
And she was the one that always encouraged you to take risks and make your dreams happen. And she'd just say to you, go for it, why not? Well, what a wonderful attitude. So do you think that attitude has really helped you to be where you are today and take those risks and be an entrepreneur?
There's a lot of thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, as I mentioned, your environment can impact how you end up in life. Whether what's the word? Whether you blame your environment for where you are today, or you use it to make a difference. And in my case, my mother, who you mentioned, yes, cancer survivor. She too has changed a lot since that cancer, for the better. She was one of 10 kids. Her father had left them, womanizer and everything like that. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that in this podcast. And so she because it's real, right? We're just being authentic in this whole, right?
Exactly.
It's life.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And in the Philippines, she's from the very tender age of, I think, 15. She's had to help her mother in the market, cooking food, selling, just so that she can help support the other 9 kids.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you become street smart. When that happens, you begin to take risks. So in a lot of ways, I don't want to say this. Sorry, Dad, if you're listening to this, he's more risk averse. He's the type of guy that, Dad was a barrister. He was a prosecutor in the Philippines as well. So he's he's an amazing man. But he's happy to stay in the same job forever. He's happy to stay in the same house forever.
Yeah, different things for different people, we're all
different things. And that's fine.
Yeah.
My mom, however, is, hey, Joel, you should try this. Hey, you should invest in that. And hey, Joel, have you thought of this? Oh, a friend of mine said this. Maybe you could try it. It's always this, can you try? And in the process, I started doing it. Yeah, okay, mom, I'll go and invest in that property. I've never invested in anything in my life. Or Joe, I'll take this job. Yeah, okay, mom, thank you. She would find the jobs for me, right? Through her connections, right? And then she'd move me to the next job and so on and so forth, right? And I'm like, wow, oh, mom, I'm gonna start X, Y, and Z and I'm gonna do this. She's like, yeah, of course, go for it. What's the
Yeah.
worst that could happen?
Yeah.
So what that did was, it gave me this confidence that, no matter what happens, she's not disapproving of me,
Yeah.
that I'm still her son and she'll love me no matter what. And each time I do something, whether I succeed or fail, her only question is, are you happy? Are you well fed? Have you eaten tonight?
Yeah.
How's your wife? How's the kids?
And
Are
they're
they
the real
happy?
important things in life, aren't
Right.
they? They're the real important. They're the things that we have to keep that perspective. As startup founders, we can get so involved, like we be identify with our startup and work like crazy and not take proper rest and burn out. But the real things are just what you stated there, and what a wonderful mother. And then I was also reading what you were saying about your father, and then you were saying watching him taught me that kindness doesn't mean weakness, but a power to heal and bring people together. I think it's a beautiful statement, and it's so true. And there can always be more kindness in the world, even in the startup space, in any space, and particularly also with people that work for us as well. Like having a kind culture, I think actually makes the business flourish as well. Because if people feel like they're treated nicely and kindly, then they're much more likely to feel
In
happier
my
and work
book,
better as well.
yeah, in my book, if people get a chance to read it, of course, I would recommend it. Naturally, the Psychological Society thinks it's worth it, so it helps with their clients, right?
Yeah.
Uh, there's a research done around the world of 200,000 managers and employees all around the world, right?
Yeah.
And see, the loneliness is not just at home. It's not just in the individual. It's in the work environment. So the book is really for businesses to read, actually. And what they did this massive survey, and what they found, usually business owners would say, "Oh, I know what my people want. They just want more salary, right? And I'll keep them happy and
Yeah.
just be done with it."
Yeah.
Couldn't be further from the truth, Paul. The top three things were related to relationships. They wanted, when they were interviewed, what makes you want to stay and loyal and happy and feels more successful at work. It was really around number. I forgot the numbering, the order, but it was really around. I wish I had a better relationship with my manager. I wish I have a better relationship with my colleagues. And the third one was, I wish I be great if I more heard and feel acknowledged about my work and what I do, and the things that I contribute is seen. And
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 years ago,
salary came down at, I think, number 7 or 8 or 10 or something like that.
yeah, that's right. It's people think that that's the number one, but not at all. People want to feel like they belong. They want to be treated nicely. They want to have a purpose, and that's what we should focus on as startup founders. Well, you've really had an amazing journey, Joel, and I'm um, really happy that you've shared that and got the message out there. There's so many lessons to be learned from this. So just to finish off, there's a question I'd like to ask, and that is, what is a question that you've never been asked that you wish somebody would have asked you?
Oh, I did not come prepared for that question, Paul. A question that you wish people.
And what's something you'd like people to know about you that nobody does or nobody's ever asked you?
What's your sense of purpose or mission in life? No, what is it? What keeps you? What gets you?
Joel, what's your purpose?
We're getting into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
No,
Self-actualization here.
no.
For me, it's what's important. Yes, go and achieve things, and but, if you want to conquer, conquer. If you want to be a millionaire, go and do that. If you want to be a plumber, I will support you. Um, for me, it's sense of purpose is so important to me. How do I add value and make a difference? Why am I here? Being a spiritual guy, I'm not here to talk about faith or anything, but I always think whatever the situation is, whether it's in business, in the office, writing a book, or speaking with you, Paul, or being asked to be in front of the audience, or if I'm in a keynote speaking slot, I always say, firstly, dear God, why me? Why have you asked me to be in this place? What do you want me to say? What is my purpose here? What is it that I'm being asked to do? And for me, even in the office, when those lifts open in North Sydney at our company, sometimes I'm the first one in the office, and while no one is there, the first thing I say, if I can just add value to one person today, baby steps, that's gonna make my day.
Yeah, that's really really nice. And I also read you actually were talking about just focusing on small steps at a time, like walking the dog or some little thing that you're doing and getting having gratitude for all those little things instead of always just looking at the big picture. And I think that's a really fantastic way to look at things as well. I thought, yeah, that's really good. I'm going to start thinking more
Yeah,
like that. Like I do
yeah,
practice gratitude, but just like
yeah,
I was walking the dog this morning before this
yes,
podcast. I'm like,
yes,
yeah, I'm really grateful for this.
grateful.
This is, yeah.
Yes, and thank you you really have looked at my profile. It's amazing. You remember it better than I can, but yeah, for people on in this podcast, I've introduced a concept of gratitude jar in the office. And the gratitude jar is you write down what you're thankful and grateful for, and don't do it don't put something in when things are going great in your life.
Yeah.
The real
Yeah.
challenge is, what are you grateful for even when you're at the lowest point, in your most challenging times, in challenging times? Because now you really have to dig deep. And some of us also, we're grateful when we wait until we get that thing, we achieve that thing that we've been waiting for, whether it's I'll celebrate when I've lost 20 kilograms, or I'll celebrate when I get a promotion. I'll celebrate when I've hit my targets, right?
Yeah.
I'll celebrate when I'm married, or I'll celebrate when it's always when, right? But to your point, it could be as simple as, wow, I woke up today and the kids want to play with me. You know what is the true measure of success? If my own kids and family don't want to spend time with me. And it also could be as simple as going to the coffee shop and having that cup of coffee and you're sipping it and being mindful and thinking, wow, this is amazing. Wow,
And
what
you're
a
doing that
first win for the day. Yes. What a win.
We do coffee.
And then you add all of these things up
Yeah.
during the day, and what you realize is 7, 8, 10 things, even in your most challenging.
Yeah. And
Count
that's
your blessings.
that's what gets you through, because we can always be grateful for something, for so many things, really. Like we used to do a practice, startup every day. Okay, guys, what are you grateful for? Some of the developers are like, Oh, it's a mindset. It took a
Yeah.
long time to actually change their mindset, but eventually they did, and that really helped them a lot. Thanks so much for giving me your time, Joel, and your experience, your wisdom, and your knowledge. I'm sure it's going to be very helpful to early stage startup founders and the whole community of entrepreneurs, really. And you're very successful. This is not about success, but you've taught us lots of lessons around failure as well. So I'm really grateful for having you on today.
Thank you, Paul. I really, really appreciate your time and the opportunity to have a voice. And I wish you and all of your audience all the very best and success.